The Yorktown Memorial Hospital loomed in the distance, its crumbling facade shrouded in the gray mist of dawn. The old bricks, now stained with time and neglect, seemed to absorb the chill of the air. Inside, the dark hallways whispered tales of long-forgotten patients, their restless spirits echoing in every shadow. Even from the street, an acrid scent of antiseptic lingered, mingling with the earthy aroma of decay. Locals spoke in hushed tones of ghostly voices, footsteps in the dead of night, and unseen eyes watching from broken windows. For decades, the hospital stood as a grim reminder of its past, a place no one dared to enter until now. Yorktown itself was a quiet, unassuming town nestled deep in the heart of Texas. Time had moved on, but the town remained frozen in its eerie stillness. On cold, foggy nights, a heavy silence draped over the streets, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of a coyote. The townsfolk kept to their homes after dark, their curtains drawn tight, as if to ward off whatever lurked beyond the hospital's iron gates. Emma Carter tightened her grip on her flashlight, her breath visible in the frosty air. A determined journalist, Emma had a knack for uncovering secrets, driven by the haunting memory of her younger sister, Lily. Lily had vanished years ago under mysterious circumstances, and Emma's relentless pursuit of the truth was as much a tribute to her sister as it was a coping mechanism for her loss. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital, with its chilling reputation, was the perfect setting for her latest investigation. The townspeople had warned her. They spoke of doors that locked on their own, chilling drafts that carried faint whispers, and sightings of shadowy figures that seemed to vanish into thin air. But warnings only fueled Emma's resolve. Her sneakers crunched on the gravel as she approached the rusted gates, their iron bars twisted like gnarled fingers reaching skyward. She paused for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest, and glanced over her shoulder. The town was distant now, its flickering streetlights barely visible through the fog. She was alone. With a creak, the gate swung open, protesting against years of disuse. Emma stepped forward, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. A sudden, icy breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it a faint, chilling whisper. "Leave," it murmured, almost too soft to hear. Emma froze, her pulse quickening as she scanned the shadows beyond the gate. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. She swallowed hard and forced herself to take another step, her resolve unwavering. Whatever secrets lay within the hospital's crumbling walls, she would uncover them. The truth, and perhaps a piece of her lost sister, awaited her inside. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital wasn't always a place of dread. Built in the 1950s, it once stood as a sanctuary, its whitewashed walls offering hope to those battling illness. It was run by a dedicated group of nuns who believed in providing care for the sick and dying, no matter their circumstances. But behind the hospital's facade of compassion lurked a darkness that would eventually stain its legacy. Rumors of unethical experiments began to circulate shortly after the hospital opened. Patients with no family were often the subjects of strange procedures, their cries muffled by the thick walls. Mysterious deaths followed, each one more inexplicable than the last. Official records often listed heart failure or complications from surgery, but whispers among the staff told a different story. These whispers spoke of deliberate malpractice, of souls trapped between life and death by the hospital's dark practices. The final blow came in the late 1970s when a devastating fire broke out on the second floor. The flames spread quickly, consuming everything in their path, but strangely, no one could determine its source. The hospital was shut down immediately after, its charred remains left to rot, a monument to the suffering endured within its walls. The closure did little to ease the fears of the townsfolk, who claimed to hear wails and whispers coming from the ruins on quiet nights. Over time, legends grew. They spoke of a vengeful nurse who still roamed the hallways, her white uniform stained with blood. Some swore they heard the cries of lost children echoing through the hospital's hollow corridors. Shadowy figures were often seen darting between broken windows, their presence sending shivers down the spines of those brave enough to venture close. But the most chilling tale of all was that of the Whisperer. According to the legend, the Whisperer was the spirit of a former doctor, one who had been deeply involved in the hospital's dark experiments. It was said that his voice could lure intruders deeper into the building, leading them to their doom. Those who heard his whispers described a cold magnetic pull that compelled them to follow even as their instincts screamed to run. Few who ventured into the hospital after dark returned, and those who did were never the same. For Emma, these stories were more than just local lore. They were pieces of a puzzle she desperately wanted to solve. Her sister Lily had vanished without a trace when Emma was just a teenager. The pain of that loss had never left her, and every unsolved mystery, every ghost story, felt like a chance to find some closure. Yorktown Memorial Hospital, with its tangled web of secrets and sorrow, was an irresistible draw. If there were answers to be found, Emma was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. As she wandered through the hospital's decaying halls, Emma's flashlight beam caught something pinned to a corkboard. She stepped closer, her heart pounding, as she brushed away the thick layer of dust. It was an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Patient disappears days before hospital's closure." Beneath it was a grainy photo of a man with hollow eyes and a cryptic smile. Emma's breath caught as she read the first line of the article. The man had vanished under circumstances eerily similar to her sister's disappearance. Her hands trembled as she folded the clipping and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't notice the faint sound of footsteps echoing behind her, growing louder with each passing second. Emma pushed open the hospital door, its rusty hinges screeching in protest. The sound echoed through the empty corridors, amplifying the stillness that enveloped her. She stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the dense darkness, revealing crumbling walls streaked with mildew. The faint scent of burning lingered in the air, mingling with the damp, musty odor of decay. Every step she took on the creaking floorboards seemed to disturb the oppressive silence, each sound magnified as if the building itself were alive. The chill in the air seemed unnatural, seeping through Emma's jacket and biting at her skin. She hesitated, shining her flashlight down a long, narrow corridor. The beam flickered momentarily, casting fleeting shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. A faint whisper reached her ears, too soft to make out, but unmistakably human. She froze, her pulse quickening. The whisper came again, more distinct this time, drifting from somewhere deeper within the hospital. "Hello?" Emma called, her voice trembling slightly. The whisper stopped, leaving only the sound of her own breathing. Gathering her courage, she moved forward, her steps careful, and deliberate. The faint draft that brushed past her carried with it a subtle, icy chill, as if someone unseen had just passed by. At the end of the corridor, Emma's flashlight illuminated a doorway hanging slightly ajar. The whispering resumed, louder now, an unsettling murmur of voices overlapping, each unintelligible but undeniably present. She gripped the flashlight tighter, her heart pounding in her chest as she pushed the door open. The room beyond was empty, save for a shattered gurney and a few scattered papers on the floor. But just as she turned to leave, she caught sight of a shadow flitting across the far wall, disappearing into the darkness beyond. "Wait!" Emma called, rushing to the spot where the shadow had vanished. There was nothing, just a cracked wall and a cold draft that seemed to emanate from nowhere. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm, and her gaze fell on a small leather-bound journal lying beneath the gurney. Kneeling, she picked it up, brushing off the dust to reveal its brittle pages. The entries inside were written in a shaky hand, filled with cryptic messages and fragmented thoughts. "Beware the Whisperer," one entry read, the letters scrawled unevenly across the page. Another warned, "He knows your secrets. He'll lure you in." Emma's eyes widened as she flipped through the journal, finding repeated references to a hidden room, a place where the hospital's darkest secrets were said to be locked away. The air seemed to grow colder as she read, and her breath became visible in the dim light of her flashlight. Suddenly, a voice, soft and familiar, broke through the silence, sending a shiver down her spine. "Emma!" it called, faint but unmistakable, her sister's voice. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and she turned toward the sound, her flashlight trembling in her grasp. The voice came again, this time from a distant room at the end of the hallway. "Lily?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Without thinking, she began to move toward the source, the journal clutched tightly to her chest. The hospital seemed to shift around her, the shadows growing deeper, the whispers more insistent. As she approached the room, the voice grew louder, more urgent. "Emma, help me." Her hand reached for the doorknob, her heart racing with a mix of fear and desperate hope. She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with the possibility that she was walking into a trap. But the thought of her sister's voice calling out to her was enough to push her forward. With a deep breath, she turned the knob and pushed the door open, the darkness beyond swallowing her whole. Emma's breath hung in the cold air as she followed the sound of her sister's voice, descending a narrow staircase into the hospital's basement. The whispers grew louder with every step, a haunting chorus echoing off the damp concrete walls. Her flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to shift and stretch with a life of their own. The basement was a labyrinth of decay and hallways, the walls lined with rusted pipes that dripped with condensation. At the far end of one corridor, Emma found a cluttered room filled with dusty shelves and overturned filing cabinets. She began rifling through the brittle papers and faded photographs, uncovering fragments of the hospital's grim history. The records revealed a series of unethical experiments conducted on patients suffering from mental illnesses. Treatments that had started as cutting-edge medical procedures quickly devolved into something far darker, inhumane trials performed in secret. A sudden noise behind her made Emma spin around, her flashlight illuminating a flicker of movement. Heart pounding, she pressed forward, her curiosity mingling with fear. She stopped, before a heavy steel door marked with faded red letters, "Restricted." A chill ran down her spine as she ran her fingers over the cold, corroded surface. Remembering the key she'd found in the journal, she fished it from her pocket and slid it into the lock. With a groan, the door creaked open, revealing a hidden operating room. The sight froze her in place. Rows of surgical tools lay scattered across blood-stained tables. The walls were lined with faded X-rays and cryptic medical diagrams. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of dried blood and something more sinister, something Emma couldn't name. She stepped cautiously into the room, her shoes crunching over shards of glass. On a nearby table, she noticed a stack of patient files, each one marked with a red stamp. Deceased. Suddenly, her flashlight flickered again, and the room's temperature plummeted. A faint breath brushed against the back of her neck, and she froze. Slowly, she turned, her heart hammering as her beam of light fell on a shadowy figure standing in the corner. Its hollow eyes seemed to pierce through her, its presence suffocating. "You're not supposed to be here," the figure whispered, its voice cold and otherworldly. Emma stumbled backward, her flashlight shaking as the figure dissolved into the darkness. The oppressive silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of her ragged breathing. Trying to steady herself, Emma's gaze fell on a large cabinet near the back of the room. Inside, she found a collection of old photographs and handwritten notes. One photo made her heart stop. A young girl in a hospital gown, her face unmistakably familiar. The girl looked exactly like her sister Lily. Emma's fingers trembled as she traced the edges of the photograph, her mind racing with questions. How could this be? What connection did Lily have to this place? The whispers returned, more insistent now, as if urging her deeper into the hospital. Clutching the photograph, Emma knew she couldn't turn back. She had to uncover the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. Emma's mind raced as she pieced together the horrifying truth. The hospital wasn't just a place for the sick and dying. It had been the stage for a dark ritual. The patients, unwilling participants, were used to anchor souls within the building, their agony feeding the hospital's malevolent power. Every whisper, every shadow was a fragment of a life trapped in eternal torment. She clutched the journal tightly, the cryptic entries now clear. This was the work of Dr. Ezra Leland, the hospital's head physician, who had been obsessed with immortality. His experiments had gone beyond medicine, delving into the occult, and now his spirit lingered as the Whisperer, guarding the ritual and its terrible secrets. "Why did you bring me here?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she stood in the center of the operating room. The air grew thick, and the shadows around her coalesced. From the darkness, the Whisperer emerged, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. "You came seeking answers," it said, its voice a cold hiss. "Now, you will stay." Emma stepped back, her flashlight flickering wildly. "I'm not like the others," she said, her voice firm despite the fear constricting her chest. "I won't let you keep me here." The Whisperer's form shimmered, revealing flashes of Dr. Leland's face. "You have no choice," it said. The room shook violently, the walls cracking as a deafening roar echoed through the hospital. The trapped spirits were stirring, their anguish fueling the building's collapse. Emma turned and ran, her footsteps echoing as she navigated the dark, crumbling hallways. Behind her, the Whisperer's guttural voice boomed, "You cannot escape." Shadows darted across the walls, reaching for her, but she pushed forward, clutching the photograph of her sister like a talisman. She stumbled into what once must have been a chapel, now a ruined shell. At its center stood an ornate altar, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Emma realized this was the heart of the ritual, the source of the hospital's curse. Her hands shook as she reached for a heavy candlestick, determined to destroy it. Suddenly, the room grew icy, and Emma collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by a vision. She saw her sister, Lily, standing in a hospital gown, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Emma?" Lily's voice was soft but insistent. "You have to let me go." Tears streamed down Emma's face. "I've missed you so much," she choked out. "I'm always with you," Lily said, stepping closer, "but you have to break the cycle. End this." She placed her hand over Emma's, guiding the candlestick to the altar. The Whisperer materialized behind her, its voice a thunderous roar. "Stop!" Emma slammed the candlestick down with all her strength. The altar shattered, releasing a blinding light that filled the room. The air was filled with anguished cries as the spirits were freed, their shadows dissolving into the light. The Whisperer let out an ear-piercing shriek before vanishing into the void. The building groaned, the walls splitting apart as the entire structure began to collapse. Emma stumbled toward the exit, her lungs burning as dust and debris filled the air. Just as she reached the doorway, she felt a hand grasp hers. She turned, expecting to see Lily, but no one was there. Only the faintest whisper remained. "Thank you." Emma burst into the cold night air as the hospital caved in behind her, a cloud of dust and rubble rising into the sky. She stood, trembling, clutching the photograph. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. As she turned to leave, a cold breeze brushed past her, carrying a familiar chilling whisper, "This isn't over." Emma returned to Yorktown with a heavy heart, her footsteps slow and deliberate as she walked through the town square. The once abandoned hospital loomed in the distance, now cordoned off with caution tape, its final fate sealed. News had spread quickly. The building was to be demolished by week's end, its shadow erased from the town's troubled history. In the days that followed, Emma worked tirelessly on her story, documenting every eerie detail, every whisper, every fleeting shadow. She spent long nights hunched over her laptop, reliving the terror she'd experienced in those crumbling halls. Her article was met with awe and skepticism alike, but it resonated with those who had lost loved ones to the hospital's dark past. Her words felt like a vindication for the restless souls trapped within its walls. Still, a deep unease lingered. Even as the townsfolk prepared for the hospital's demolition, Emma couldn't shake the sense that something had followed her home. One overcast afternoon, Emma made her way to her sister's grave. She knelt before the headstone, her fingers tracing the name etched into the cold marble. "I did it, Sarah," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I found the truth. I hope you can rest now." For the first time in years, a sense of peace washed over her. She felt lighter, as though a weight she'd carried for far too long had finally lifted. But peace, it seemed, was fleeting. That night, as Emma lay in bed, the familiar creaks and groans of her old house seemed louder than usual. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She pulled the covers tighter around her, willing herself to sleep. Then she heard it, a whisper. "Welcome back." Emma's eyes shot open, her breath catching in her throat. She sat up slowly, the room bathed in the faint glow of the moonlight. Her heart pounded as she scanned the shadows, every fiber of her being screaming that she was not alone. The whisper came again, soft and taunting, curling around her like a cold breeze. Welcome back. She froze, her mind racing. Had the curse truly been broken? Or had she brought someone back with her? The air grew heavier, the darkness pressing in as the whisper turned into a faint, eerie laughter. It was coming from the corner of the room, where shadows pooled unnaturally thick. Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the bedside lamp. The light flickered on, banishing the shadows, but the oppressive silence that followed was somehow worse. She sat motionless, straining to hear anything beyond the frantic beating of her own heart. A single word echoed in her mind: run. But she couldn't. She was rooted to the spot, fear coursing through her veins like ice. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the house fell silent. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving her shaken and drenched in cold sweat. Morning came, bringing with it a false sense of normalcy. The sun shone brightly, birds chirped, and the distant sound of demolition crews echoed through the town. Emma watched from her window as the first wrecking ball struck the hospital's facade, sending a cloud of dust into the air. It was over. The hospital was gone, or so she thought. That night, as she prepared for bed, a chill ran down her spine. She glanced toward the corner of her room, empty, but the memory of the whisper lingered. As she turned off the light, she heard it once more, faint but unmistakable. This isn't over? Emma's breath hitched, her mind racing. The hospital's curse hadn't been confined to its walls. It had latched onto her, a dark shadow that refused to be left behind. She stared into the darkness, her resolve hardening. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning.